In our past few webinars, we were able to speak with some very knowledgeable people about the success that their organizations found deploying enterprise content management. We've heard success stories from government organizations, manufacturers, a financial company, and more. But we continue to hear the same question over and over from our viewers, and that is, people want to know how these organizations even begin to deploy ECM. Deployment is a big undertaking, and we've found that the key differentiator between ECM projects that are a success and others that fail revolves largely around the planning stages. It seems like a simple enough idea, but we've seen too many organizations overlook key concepts in their project plans, so we wanted to dedicate some time to tell you about our patented methodology and how it's proven to be so valuable to our customer partners. So let's get right into it. Here's our agenda. We'll start with a couple of introductions and then get right into the project management methodology, which we call the ECM Ecosystem. My colleague Cass will tell you what the ECM Ecosystem is all about and how it benefits organizations. And then we'll look at a few real-world examples of where it's impacted the outcome of ECM projects. And we'll leave some time for questions at the end of the session. If you scan the QR code with your smartphone, it'll take you right to our Twitter page where you can send in remarks. But before we get to the live questions, I'll give you a brief overview of who we are and say thanks to our sponsor for this webinar, Fujitsu. And feel free to use the WebEx chat function to send in any questions you have. We'll try to answer them while the webinar is happening as well as at the end. I'll put the QR code up again at the end of the session. So on the line with us today, we have Cass Holloway. How are you today, Cass?
Good, Kyle. How are you?
Doing just fine. Cass is our VP of Solutions Sales in the Western region for ImageSource. I've asked Cass to join us today because of his experience with ECM Ecosystem Methodology. He'll be giving us some definitions and a high-level look at how great project roadmaps are created. And of course, I have our contact information up on the screen in case you want to talk with us more after the webinar. But please feel free to use the chat function in WebEx with us anonymously on your screen and send any questions you have, and we'll do our best to address them at the end of the session. Before I pass it off to Cass to talk about the ECM ecosystem, I want to speak briefly to the folks who might not have as much experience with ECM. This is a very expansive topic, so I think it's important to outline some of the high-level benefits of an ECM system before we discuss how to properly plan for it. Companies usually go in with the goal of automating processes and replacing paper storage with electronic documents, but others focus on other benefits such as increased security, an improved ability to meet document retention and destruction regulations, or enhanced competitive ability through lower operational costs. Others might focus on improved employee, customer, or constituent satisfaction, global access to content, or in some cases, all of these benefits and more. The need for ECM can be very simple or very complex. Some organizations want to revolutionize the way they do business, and others simply want to get rid of paper transactions. Either way, the planning stages of ECM deployment are crucial to getting the best result. If you want to delve deeper into ECM definitions or theory, I encourage you to check out aim.org. AIM is definitely a great resource for expanding your knowledge on this technology. So now I'll pass it off to Cass to introduce the ECM Ecosystem Methodology, what it is, and what it means for organizations preparing to deploy ECM. Cass?
Okay, Kyle, thanks. I appreciate that. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day to learn more about our consulting practice that we have here at ImageSource that we call the ECM Ecosystem. Now, the reason we developed this practice and this methodology is because every enterprise out there, they expect information to improve the business outcomes that they have. In order to do this, it takes more than just a successful enterprise content management implementation. Now, to be effective, customers have to align their ECM investments with their organizational strategy and their organizational priorities, as well as elevate the conversation to a much higher level in their own departments or organizations as well, along with preparing change management that comes with that. So installation is just one small piece, and we've come to realize that over the years. Now, ImageSource has been in business for 17 years, and during that time, we've been part of many successful project rollouts. We've also seen our share of failures as well. And to us, a successful project rollout comes at the intersection of leadership, strategy, project scope, and successful change management. And with that, today we want to talk about a couple of the challenges you face in deploying successful ECM projects. And by now, everyone's aware that 80% of all the information in your organization is unstructured. Now, what's unstructured information? It's word processing files, it's emails, it's spreadsheets, web content, images, graphics. It's any digital asset that you create to use as part of a business process. Now, it's also been stated that 90% of this unstructured information remains unmanaged within all organizations out there. And the industry estimates also state that that unstructured information is growing at a rate of 36 to 40% per year. So it is a challenge. You know, this slide, everybody has probably seen some of the statistics that exist. But really what it says is that unstructured information represents a huge problem that organizations have to deal with. These individual statistics remind us that paper is expensive and it's risk-laden. More specifically, though, there are process barriers every company faces with paper and a lack of automation. For instance, if you talk specifically about access and collaboration, it's a problem. The limitations that paper-based processes and information that paper contains creates a barrier between coworkers, supervisors, vendors, business partners, customers, and the very information they need to keep up with the demands of their job. Now, these limitations increase bottom-line operating costs and at times can also stunt revenue growth, and it definitely decreases customer service. If you talk about, you know, the challenge with integration with other business applications, there's great value in realizing productivity gains by integrating document management systems with your individual line of business applications for specific tasks, specifically when you think of accounts payable or claims processing, loan approval, customer service, account management. There's great value in this. But it's also very costly when you start talking about custom programming that exists and all the old technology and legacy systems that have to be integrated with and shut down. The other barriers that you face are controlling access and the use rights and security. Now, a common concern that we've heard is about implementing a document management system. Comes to us about controlling access, the user rights, the security. Now, many business and individuals ask themselves, with all the documents online, what safeguards are put in place to protect my business from misuse and security breaches? And then lastly, document management has been expensive and cost prohibitive. Until very recently, it's been targeted towards big business and government agencies, making it way too expensive for small and medium-sized businesses. And we're starting to see that change. But again, the point here is that documents are strategic assets to your business, and they should be leveraged for maximum competitive advantage. And doing that comes from having a well-thought-out plan. Now, the other challenge your business faces, so that shows you that processes are out of control, paper's risky, but the other challenge is really the complexity that we face. I mean, if you think about your own jobs, even the most expert professionals, and I'm sure some of you are, you struggle to master all the tasks that are coming across your desk. Now, the drive to simplicity today exists because complexity is not only expensive, but it also creates organizational chaos. And complexity, no doubt, adds to the failure of ECM deployments and the benefits those deployments could have on your organizations or your agency. If you take a look at CIO Magazine, and this is a year old, but the statistics haven't changed. Fully 62% of all IT projects fail to meet their goals, and over 50% of all ECM projects fail. And why do they fail? I mean, there's a myriad of reasons: poor planning, goals, inappropriate skills, lack of communication. I mean, with the challenge of content growing exponentially enterprise-wide, and you couple that with a failure in delivering successful IT projects to help alleviate those challenges, then people have to start thinking there's got to be a better way to ensure a more successful outcome. And in our years of delivering the ECM application solutions, we've learned a few things along the way. And one of the key things that we've learned is that organizations that take a strategic approach to ECM implementation are much more successful than those that don't. And when we talk about a strategic approach to ECM implementation, the first thing that organizations need to do is they need to recognize what they don't know. They need to acknowledge the complexity of their own environment and what exists in that environment. And they need to understand how to deal with it. And that's part of the reason why we're here today. To deal with complexity, what's needed, and we're going to go back to this a lot, is a comprehensive strategy coupled with good tactics and sound leadership. And that ensures successful execution. Good strategy matched with outstanding execution, in our experience, has been the best assurance of success. So a minute ago, I said that the reasons that IT projects fail can generally be wrapped up into three reasons: strategy, execution, and leadership. And most companies today know that they know how to plan. They have people employed that understand work breakdown structures. You know, people are PMP certified and Lean certified. They typically have knowledge and expertise on how to do things effectively, but yet the statistics continue to show that effectiveness that they seek doesn't occur. And in our experience, they don't realize success because they make mistakes in one or more of the three areas of leadership, strategy, and execution. So over the years, we've developed some best practices for successful application rollouts of enterprise content management technology. And we'd like to share 5 of those with you today. And so the first best practice, and I'm going to go back really an overarching, business is complex today. And so that's why people drive towards best practices, and that's why they bring outside parties in, is to, you know, kind of wade through that complexity. But the first one is any ECM initiative should improve the business outcomes. That's always the goal, improve the business outcome that you're targeting. And improving business outcomes helps improve the overall health of any business or any government agency. And business leaders at all levels, they're focused on 5 specific things to help their overall organization improve a business outcome. And those 5 things are developing leaders, increasing revenue, reducing cost, avoiding risk, and innovating to bring about new products and services so they can help continue the cycle. And the outcome of any ECM initiative that's ever undertaken should connect to at least one of these 5 areas. Now, so the first best practice is to make sure you align your project goals with your company's overarching business objectives in one of these 5 areas. In our experience, we've seen that projects stand a greater chance of gaining approval if you align the project up with one or more of these areas. Now, these are the drivers, they're the qualitative measures and the talking points that you need to use when you're talking about and justifying an ECM project to a C-level executive. Now, the second best practice is that we all know that business processes have become very complex, and the traditional definition of business process is that it's a sequence of steps and tasks that produce a valued output. And a process is just simply a way for organizing work so that it can be performed both effectively and efficiently. And it gives you something to manage against, and hopefully if it's done well and it's done right, it can provide you with a competitive advantage. So to improve on the processes, you have to adhere to the 3 Ps for continuous process improvement: process discovery, process optimization, and process implementation. So if you radically focus on the first 2, process discovery and process optimization, then usually the third one comes pretty easily. I mean, one of the gotchas here, if you take a bad process and automate it, it's still a bad process, right? So the second best practice for having successful ECM application deployments is to make sure you have a solid understanding of the processes you want to improve, and the requirements have to be thoroughly documented. So this information is going to give you the baseline that you need to stack rank your projects in order of importance and help you build out that roadmap complete with the timelines needed for completion. So the next best practice is that, you know, as we just said, processes are the lifeblood or any business of government agencies. And document-driven business processes, both electronic and paper, contain data. And the data in that paper drives business activity and revenue. So documents are also collaborated on to produce innovative products and services and new ideas to serve your customers. But we also showed earlier that documents are also costly and very risk-prone. In today's regulatory and litigious environment, it's imperative that you not only manage content for profit, but you also manage it to avoid the risks associated with it. And our third best practice is to ensure you have a successful deployment is to make sure you target only one business area to do a proof of concept with. The E in enterprise content management has largely been unrealized, and one of the reasons is that people bite off too much. So target one area and one area only. Measure the costs associated with the process before you begin. Implement the appropriate ECM technology. Work the appropriate change management practices that you put in place to help the user adoption. Wait 60 days, measure the benefit, adjust accordingly, and repeat with the next project. So next, I mean, everybody's making multiple acquisitions. I mean, that's part of the business complexity is that, you know, people are acquiring or they're outsourcing key aspects of their business, and simply trying to sustain your own IT infrastructure. It's not only complicated, it's also daunting for IT staff. I mean, one thing, if there's IT personnel on this call, they know that you're caught right in the middle of the line of business who's delivering the service and executive management that wants, you know, to make sure the business stays up and running smooth. And you guys are caught right in the middle, and that's a pretty pressure-packed area to be. So the fourth best practice for having a successful enterprise content management application deployment is to make sure you accurately rationalize the ECM infrastructure you currently have in place and then match that against your business requirements, what they say you need. And once you understand the gaps between those two, then you can start to pursue the appropriate vendors and technologies to help fill those gaps. So in the last best practice, and one that's, you know, I've seen really change over the years, I've been in this business for 15 years, is really the complexity of the vendors involved in the space and also their offerings. If you look at this year's Gartner Magic Quadrant, which is really kind of the gold standard for ranking vendors in various spaces, there's 21 different ECM vendors in this year's Magic Quadrant. And then they further break down those vendor offerings in 4 different categories: transactional content management, social content management, online channel optimization, and content management as infrastructure. And so, and that's just with these particular ECM vendors. It doesn't include all the other companies and the technologies that contribute to enterprise content management: workflow, BPM, fax, portals, taxonomy, search. So these are the things that people don't see when they rely on simply these vendor rankings. And then when you add to that the complexity of each individual vendor, they have multiple product offerings with new product rollouts, the acquisitions, the incessant product rebranding. It adds to the complexity that it's almost impossible to select the right product. So the 5th best practice for having successful ECM application deployments is to make sure you engage someone to help you choose the right products that meet not only your current business requirements, but also include the platform capabilities to deploy to future applications. So those are some of the best practices, and that brings us to, okay, why an ECM ecosystem? Again, as I stated in the opening, and I stated all the way through, the enterprises expect information to improve business outcomes. That's why you deploy this technology. And today, organizations, they're simply not realizing the value of those investments they've made. Managing unstructured information and the associated processes, it's not just a departmental problem anymore that can be solved with a quick fix solution that meets the needs of just one business area. Now, the volume of unstructured content, it grows almost unchecked, and as does the universe of internal and external users involved in the creation, collaboration, contribution, and consumption of all that unstructured content. So, as I just stated, the number of vendors and their product offerings is extremely complex as well. And all of these factors have to be considered before you deploy an ECM solution in your organization. Now, a lot of organizations have taken the point solution approach to content management by deploying different content management components on a department-by-department basis. And there are some organizations that literally have 10s, 20s, 30 different content management implemented in their organization. And from an IT standpoint, the result of this approach has been multiple systems from multiple suppliers providing duplicate functionality, and the cost of planning, selecting, implementing, and supporting all these multiple content-related systems have been duplicated many times over for multiple years. But worst of all, this approach to managing content guarantees that you have a proliferation of information silos within your organization, which makes it difficult, if not impossible, to share information or leverage those information assets that have already been created across multiple departments. At least not without very, very costly integration, which adds even more to the expense and complexity of what you're trying to do. What organizations need are solutions that serve the entire enterprise and the extended enterprise, not just point solutions that address only the isolated individual business unit business problems. Now, in this economic climate, cost matters just as much as benefits, and technology decisions carry repeating long-term costs in the form of hardware, maintenance, support, training, and this is why strategy and planning are essential to the effective deployment of ECM solutions. So let's talk briefly here about our ECM ecosystem methodology. Now, we've developed this. It's designed to come in and assess your existing environment, show you where the gaps are and what you have in technology and in business process, align the project with your corporate vision and corporate priorities, and produce a roadmap for a future state environment, and finally wrap it all up with a business case to help you justify the project. Now, one of the things that we'll do is help you have a clear understanding of the costs and the trade-offs for each option that we direct you towards. At the end of our engagement, you're going to have all the information you need to move forward and get the buy-in and executive support to make your ECM vision a reality. So the methodology that we have, it's a 4-phased approach, and it can last anywhere between 3 and 12 weeks. In the first phase, that's where we're going to focus. We're going to come in and we're going to focus on the information gathering. That's where we do our learning. We're going to determine your strategy, your current state environment for the business processes, for the IT that you have implemented. We use questionnaires, executive interviews, line of business interviews, whiteboard exercises, team collaboration meetings, everything that we need to generate all the necessary information to move to phase 2. And phase 2, that's where we focus on the analysis. Now, that's where we'll conduct industry and customer benchmarking. We'll leverage analyst opinions, use case studies, standards comparisons such as CMIS and GARP, and we'll consider state-of-the-art technologies as well, along with current trends in the target company industry. So that's where we do our homework, and that moves us to phase 3, and that's where we generate a report, and we get that report back to you. Here we develop recommendations, the tools, the roadmaps that will allow you to have everything you need for the successful execution of the strategy. And then the last phase, and really this is one of the most important, that's where we come back to you for validation and final presentation. And then this phase is where we'll present our work back to you as a project team for validation and approval. And once it approves, you approve it, we'll either prepare you, the project team, for the executive level presentation, or we'll present our findings on your behalf, whatever helps you the most. And so that's the 4-phased approach. It's in anywhere between 3 and 12 weeks. And to get started with image source and ECM Ecosystem Engagement, just like anything else, you need to secure authority to proceed. You'll fill out an ECM Ecosystem questionnaire, so it'll provide us the information to get you the initial scoping and what the requirements will look like, whether it's a 3-week engagement or a 12-week engagement. We'll develop what we call a project charter, which outlines the investment necessary to engage with us. And then we'll have a conference call with the project team to outline the scope of the work. And once it's approved, we'll have a finalized plan, schedule the work, and start the process. And that is the ECM ecosystem.
Thanks, Cass. Now that we have a general sense of the methodology, let's walk through a couple of real-life examples where it had a big impact on the outcome of an ECM deployment. We'll start in the private sector with a big box retailer. Whether you're a small or a big company, the same rules that Cass was talking about apply. You simply must have a good deployment plan for ECM. The big box retailer in question had a number of separated systems living in different business units, and the amount of content they were ingesting was growing at a very fast rate. Unfortunately, they had many issues utilizing this content. There was no secure way to search for or access information, no effective means for collaboration, and the company was unable to get a handle on the unstructured data enterprise-wide, and as we know, that can be a big problem. Worse yet, there was no central point of access for IT, and the existing technology investments were being greatly underutilized. So enter image source with an ECM ecosystem engagement. Starting with identifying the key pain points and business drivers, image source developed a roadmap for deployment that solved the pain points of the highest value business units first. This enabled the company to see significant ROI very early in the project. In fact, part of the strategy was to develop a financial justification for deploying ECM, which meant clearly demonstrating the ROI to the retailer before any investment was made. Also, ImageSource was intimately involved with selecting an ECM provider based on the needs of the retailer and, of course, our experience. In short, the ECM ecosystem engagement helped solve the pains discussed earlier in a way that provided a transparent path to success and fast ROI. A public organization can also greatly benefit from an ECM ecosystem engagement. One particular Washington State government agency had an outdated ECM system in place and brought in ImageSource to come up with a plan that would bring them up to speed and keep them there. But during the engagement, ImageSource brought to light a number of other issues that the agency had overlooked. They were processing over 70,000 document pages daily, with hundreds of staff required to manage the business processes associated with their sector. It became apparent that there was definitely a better way to handle this volume. It was also found that the old system was problematic from a security standpoint and really wasn't up to par with certain government mandates. They were experiencing performance issues constantly, and their system uptime was far from where it needed to be to remain efficient. This means a lot of wasted resources, which, as we all know, is just unacceptable in a time where everyone is closely watching dollars. The bottom line was that they needed a clear roadmap for the future that would resolve the issues which they had become accustomed to putting up with. With the ECM Ecosystem Methodology, the organization was shown a clear plan to allow for the necessary upgrades. The plan involved separating application, presentation, and content management software, which improved performance and reduced downtime throughout the department. ImageSource was also able to show in plain English how the integration of workflow tools, e-forms, and other streamlined processes would yield cost savings to the department, which would deliver the ROI necessary to justify their investment. So because of this thorough approach to content management, the department was able to reach its goals without breaking the bank or being surprised by some factors that they hadn't considered. And when you're upgrading from an existing content management system, this is a big win. Upgrades can be a messy process if you don't approach them methodically. And finally, back to the private sector, we had an interesting case with a major retail bank that was having difficulty supporting two content management systems that were separate. There were a number of improvements that the bank was required to make by a government mandate, and because of the difficulty of managing these systems, they were having trouble staying compliant with these new laws. The bank decided that they needed a dedicated personnel overseeing the content management systems, but wanted to be sure that they were hiring the right people with the skills to move the department forward. So they needed two things: a roadmap to tell them where they were taking their ECM systems and what kind of skills a new ECM manager would need to steer the ship. So the ECM Ecosystem Engagement provided an overview of the existing skills in the company, both technical and business skills, and provided a skills gap analysis that would help the bank meet the upcoming content management related projects, as well as the required upgrades and enhancements. The plan also allowed for a content management department roadmap for training and mentoring, and job progression schedule for all staff, not just the new hires. In short, ImageSource helped the bank define a clear path and reach their goals and identify the right people to oversee their progress with content management.